Hello and welcome to Systems Reimagined. My name is Benji and I'm joined by my two great co-hosts, Samuel and Rachel. And today we're just going to be breaking down a little bit of a kind of lighter episode, shall we say, talking about some of the COVID developments in the UK with regards to vaccine rollout and cases and deaths, sadly, and also just other developments with regards to Scotland and things along those lines, and potentially some stuff on the EU. Then we're going to move on to the US to discuss the GameStop fiasco, which just went down, which I personally found quite funny, I won't lie. And then finally, we're going to basically review some of Joe Biden's first executive orders in his first week, essentially. So yeah, I guess I'll start it off then with the UK vaccine rollout and essentially daily figures. So I actually want to give credit to the government here because I think this is a new thing, but they've laid out the data for COVID every day in a really nice and graphical way. So it actually makes it really easy for people to kind of see where we're going. And in this case, actually gives them hope because really looks like we're on a decline, especially with regards to people who've tested positive with COVID. So that's good because, obviously it mirrors the idea that, the vaccine is, the pandemic is shrinking with the R rate now being in between 0.7 and 1.1. So we had 16,840 positive cases today, which is much less than what we saw, I think it must have been 2 weeks ago now, where it was almost 70,000 in one day. So that's really good. We've seen a slight decrease in our deaths. We have still have pretty high death rate. We had 1,449 deaths today. We have a decrease in the amount of patients admitted to hospitals. So it was 2,642 today. And with regards to vaccines, we've now administered, I believe, around 10 million vaccines. So that's kind of insane in the vaccine rollout. The idea that we've almost vaccinated I think around 15% or just under 50% of the UK population is really something we should all be celebrating because it's quite incredible. And I'll pass it off to you guys now, but just in terms of it's a nice contrast, I guess, to see the vaccination program being rolled out under the NHS, how much more efficient it was than what we saw with the test and trace, for example, which was outsourced to Serco. So yeah, that's just I think quite a good case study, I feel with regards to how we could approach the health services more generally with regards to efficiency and things, and I guess debunk some of the myths which I see peddled around, which is so many of these government funded institutions are just so inefficient and all these things, so that's just my thoughts on the matter. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, if you guys want to add or anything.
I do think it's good news that the general deaths and cases are going down right now, and also obviously, as we mentioned last week, the great vaccine rollout has been very efficient and has worked well. And as you said, it does show that it does make the case for a public and also localized way of vaccinating people and making sure that it's just shown that's been a bit more efficient than the other projects that we've outsourced. And it does dispel a myth that as you said, the public can be a bit more inefficient, compared to the private.
You mean efficient?
Efficient, yeah, sorry. Compared to the private sector. That's pretty good. Another interesting point to raise, I think, there's also been discussion, I guess, from labor side especially, about potentially, the ban in travel. And I see that is it true that they implemented, they want to do a hotel quarantine system?
Yeah.
Which I also think is a positive development. I mean, I think it should have been done maybe a lot sooner, but it is positive that, that the government is being a bit more, efficient and trying to think more outside the box that they did in the first outbreak. So it is, there's finally some positive developments all around in the UK. So I think that's all good. Yeah.
Maybe the government was listening to our podcast about comparing COVID responses and decided to pick some things up from it.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Just in terms of the private sector, though, obviously I think it needs addressing that there is quite a difference between the test and trace system and the vaccination system in terms of the urgency. Although test and trace, like it does save lives, it's a lot less direct, and the vaccination, I think whether it was public or private, would have been successful. But I agree that it's clearly been incredibly successful, a lot more than anyone would have thought in terms of those targets being reached. 10 million people is obviously a really, really strong statistic to have got to kind of by the end of the first full month. Going kind of on from that, in terms of the vaccinations in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, Nicola Sturgeon has tonight come out and said that she's hoping for primary school children to be back in school kind of within about 2 weeks' time, which is a lot faster on the track than England are expecting. They've kind of given March 7th as a rough ballpark figure for teachers to be prepared, but those targets still need to be continued to be reached for children in England to go back kind of next month, but it certainly won't be the end of this month. The government have been clear, so I think that's quite interesting in terms of the UK as a whole are all kind of obviously vaccinating to a strong level, but the different approaches with those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it could have to do with the fact that, well, at least in Scotland, they locked down earlier than England did, right? And also, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, when she announced that lockdown, she also made clear that she felt that they were a couple weeks behind where England was with regards to the progress of this new variant and things like that. So that, I mean, I would assume that has to do with it. So I mean, I guess it also lines up with like the UK, not the UK, England coming back a bit later with regards to school opening and stuff like that. But yeah, positive news though. I mean, yeah, I mean, just myself, I've been quite a massive critic of the government, and so it's quite nice actually to see, like, you know, some of these steps just finally getting employed, right, to combat the virus and things. But one thing I do actually quickly want to note was about the quarantining in the hotels. Like, I definitely welcome it, and I think it's a good idea. But I think that I think in order to like it for it to really like have you know, a maximum impact, it has to be combined with like other COVID measures, I feel like. So in Australia, for example, it's not like they're isolating people in hotels and then, you know, just not locking down when they had like a couple of cases in a city, for example. Like, they did both of those things, right?
Yeah.
To help it get under control. So although like it is definitely a good thing, I feel like they really have a great impact. It should, you know, essentially combine it with other measures, essentially, to really maximize that effect.
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-pronged approach to deal with this crisis. And I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but was it the case that only countries that are in the red like zone, like, which is considered very high risk, are they the only ones who quarantine in the hotels, or was it also anyone who travels here?
I think it was only in the red zone.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was.
I mean, obviously, in my eyes, I think it should be everyone in general just should quarantine, at least, until they get their tests, especially maybe for the lower risk countries. And yeah, that combined with, I don't think we should be encouraging flights in the first place. I think, I find it hard to like think what exactly, if you, besides returning back home to the UK from another country, like, why else would you be traveling? Like, a lot of like white collar jobs could be done, like most of it can be done via like online, with Skype and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm wondering why. I would wonder why people would need to travel here. And regardless, I think just trying to limit flights in general, hotel quarantine, or just quarantine as state made quarantine. That could be effective. And then, yeah, as you said, just locking down, like being very proactive in how we lock down. Even when there's very few cases, just lock down once again. And you can see that all the like successful cases like Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, they were very like proactive. And even when it was just like, even in the single digits, like they locked down right away and just squashed it as soon as it could grow even further. So, yeah, as you said, just to echo, it's just a quarantine is only one aspect and needs to be it's a multi-layered approach, and yeah, and I think the government is slowly coming to the realization of that, and I mean, not much to complain about this week.
Yeah, and I'll go to you in a second, Rachel. But especially like with now the government, it seems like they've had some renewed fears, I guess is the right word, with regards to the spread of this South African variant of the virus. So if they really want to keep that under control and stuff, it is a wise idea. They're to have, I guess, these kind of localized approaches to these things, and just combining it with the hotel quarantine, etc. So yeah, I'll pass to you, Rachel. Now that's the last thing I
Yeah,
want
I
to say on it.
think just to agree really with you in terms of what you're saying, Benji, Scotland obviously able to start reopening schools those few weeks earlier than England are because they were quicker to lock down in the first place. So again, it kind of highlights that taking that decisive action quicker is going to enable the opening up and these returns to normality in the long run. Also, just in terms of what you were saying with this new South African variant, they've now seen kind of similar codes with the Kent variant, which we saw in December, which apparently there's some kind of skepticism about now in terms of whether the vaccinations are able to cover a South African Kent variant. But I think
Dual combo.
yes,
It's the randomest combination.
yeah.
The African Kent.
But so there's some concern. I think the government were quite keen to downplay that and say that the vaccine will still be effective. But certainly, if it is effective, then it's the kind of double vaccination process rather than just this single dose that a lot of people have been given. The only kind of caveat, although we're all like very kind of happy obviously this week in terms of that 10 million being reached with the vaccination, if you then look at how many of those 10 million have had the second dose of the vaccine, like it's absolutely minute in comparison. I don't have the exact figure.
It's 500,000.
Yes, yeah. So like a fraction of the overall amount, and that is the only way that kind of SAGE and these leading scientists have said people will be immune kind of long term is to have that second dose. So hopefully that's something that happens quickly, but in the meantime, just that first vaccination is certainly effective.
Also, I'm not really sure why the reason for this is, but like when you have only one vaccination of the virus, you're more susceptible to getting, one dose of the vaccination, you're more susceptible to getting a mutation in the virus. So that could be what we're seeing with this Kent South African strain. But that may just be speculation. But I know that is true though, that you have more potential for mutations. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, nothing else to add really on that. I hope that this the second dose comes soon. But I saw some things with the I guess with the EU. I mean, they asked. No, sorry, it was the WHO actually who said that the UK should slow down their vaccination program to help the distribution of vaccines globally. Which, to be fair, I mean, like I'm really happy about the vaccination program and stuff, but I understand like the effort. I mean, what the WHO is saying, like obviously, we've spoken about this on the podcast as well. There's obviously a huge discrepancy as to which countries are getting these vaccines and which countries are not. And so a lot of countries, as in the global south, as we've gone over, are struggling to get these vaccines, or they don't have the infrastructure and need the support, and they're just not really getting that. So I wonder how that dynamic's going to play out, because I don't know if the government's too keen really to slow down, because it is a good achievement, and like if we're being completely honest here, like one of the few good things that they've actually done in this whole pandemic. So I mean, and I'm not also trying to downplay it. Like obviously it's amazing that we have all the people vaccinated, but it is just a fact that they haven't done a lot of things good.
No, yeah. I do think regarding the distribution globally, I think what the WHO is saying, I mean, it makes sense morally and also in a globalized world. If you want to combat the virus once and for all, you need everywhere to be vaccinated to a large extent. So even say if the UK just vaccinated ourselves, like if there's other countries that are lacking in vaccines, then that could create a whole new problem in the UK. So it does make sense, but I just don't see, from like the point of view, like the image point of view of the leader, like it would look very stupid to them, I think, especially when it comes to elections, electorally speaking, to give up vaccines to countries that are halfway across the world. It doesn't look good. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, it just there's not, the optics are not good for any leader to do that. So I'm very skeptical that they'll eventually do it. I think they're gonna try get everyone in the UK vaccinated as quickly as possible. But I do think the main way of providing more access to these vaccines is to take the patents off, and that allows other countries to produce it and distribute it within their own population. Because I think that's the main driver of the lack of access. So I think that should be the main focus. And also, yeah, I mean, sure, I guess we can try like pressure the global north countries that have been able to deploy vaccines very quickly, put some pressure on them to try distribute it more evenly, but I don't think that will happen. So I think patents is one of the routes to do that.
Before I go to you, Rachel, I just want to say that in terms of patents, some of them are open patents. I think like the Moderna one is open patent, but for the ones which actually could really help some of the global South countries, we've spoken. I believe it was Rachel who spoke about this in the previous podcast about how that a really big issue is storing the vaccine at these cold temperatures, right? So with something like the Pfizer vaccine, which needs to be stored at like -70 or something like that degrees, right? Having trying to develop the infrastructure to a company that is much harder than if we had something like the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which only needs to be stored in like -2 degrees or something, which is much easier to cater for. And a lot of these global South countries already have the infrastructure to, store vaccines at those temperatures, right? So I don't know if the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is open source patent, but I don't think it is. But I will have to check on that. But I'm not of the impression that it is. But yeah, if something like that or some more of the high the vaccines you could resist degradation at higher temperatures were kind of open source, that'd be much more useful. Would be very useful for these global South countries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree there. Really, I think I'm not 100% sure myself, but yeah, certainly in terms of kind of the demographics and things of other countries, it's going to be so much easier, as you said, just for storage and things like that. I think it's difficult because, like, if we're being blunt about it as well, it's kind of, would you rather save the lives of your own citizens or like citizens abroad in terms of the like helping a worldwide kind of distribution effort? And at the moment, the UK government are just completely focused on the UK population getting vaccinated. And I think realistically, as much as they should kind of play their part globally and help out with the World Health Organization and other such agendas and things, they do have to, just as you were saying, Samuel, in terms of like votes and elections and things, put that in the forefront, which, I mean, we don't need to tell them to do. I think they're certainly like doing that of their own accord, but you would hope that with time, as more and more people get vaccinated and these targets hopefully do continue to be met, that they play more of a global role as well.
Yeah, I will also say, like, I will say though, I think that dynamic though of like the UK being more of a global role in this vaccine distribution and stuff could have been achieved if it didn't have such a bad response. Like in New Zealand, for example, we see that within their own region they are distributing some of their vaccine supply to kind of surrounding countries. But then again, New Zealand and Australia, for example, they have had a very limited death toll, right? Yeah. And so I understand, like, from the conservatives' perspective, right? Like, they've had a bad death toll, a really bad death toll of over 100,000 now, and now to try win sympathy, get the sympathy of the public to allow you to distribute the vaccines to other countries is like virtually, I mean, it would be impossible, right? So I do think they could have played that role, but just the way that they handled the pandemic has essentially limited that option.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to come on with the kind of advertisements just while we're on COVID?
Oh yeah, I mean sure. I mean yeah, just for in terms of advertisements, like there have been these. I think we mentioned it in our interview with Charisse, but there was these advertisements been going around, and I can show them on screen now. And it's the idea here. I mean, at least my take on it would be, it's the government. It's so first of all, as you can see, it's like a photo of some people with oxygen mask on essentially, and it's saying, oh yeah, like tell them that you bent the rules. I think that's what the wording is. I'm not really seeing it directly now, but I believe that's the wording. And so this whole like idea here, in my view, is just kind of shifting the blame of a lot of these hospitalizations, a lot of these deaths, onto the public, which obviously I don't really think is obviously there was like there is like some public blame, I guess, but in reality though, if you had a really strong government response, the percentage of the public which would be breaking these laws would be obviously reduced. Like if you had a lockdown where something that you saw in France, for example, I believe, where you had like roadblocks, or in Spain as well, they had the same thing. Like obviously, less people are going to be risking the rules because they're going to get punished for it, right? So like I think the messaging turns people against one another, and I think that's also mirrored in just some YouGov polls that I've seen of recently, which is said. It did one poll saying, oh, how serious are you taking this lockdown compared to the first? And then another poll saying, how do you perceive other people are taking this lockdown compared to what they did in the first lockdown? And for the personal responses, I think it was 84% of people said, oh, I'm taking it more seriously than the first. But then the perception of other people, the responses were around 80% thought that people were taking it less seriously than the first time. So I mean, the messaging obviously seems to be effective in that case. So yeah, I mean that's all. I mean, I really have to say on it. I do think it just really is distasteful and like not really representative of how government action could really have reduced this death toll overall, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not much else to add from what you said. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not saying that everyone should stay home and stick to the rules. Obviously, that goes without saying. But yeah, I do think it's been a consistent theme throughout this whole pandemic. Shifting the blame and trying to cover up their own government failures. And yeah, I think throughout the whole thing, it's been quite effective because I think throughout every day on the news you see like, especially in the first round, like you see like those photos of people just on the like everyone on the in the park, and they're just like trying to give the sense like no one is following rules at all. And yeah, just I mean, as you said, like the public perception is that it seems like despite people being more strict in this lockdown, people perceive that people are less strict. So yeah, as you said, there's a gulf, and it seems like that marketing aspect to deflect the handling of this crisis seems to be working. So yeah, I mean, not much else to add.
Yeah, I do think distasteful is the word. Like they've really kind of plowed some money in. Um, I've seen that advertisement on like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. They're really kind of peddling those social media apps that are most kind of frequented by young people, and I think really kind of trying to scapegoat younger people for this increase, and quite effectively too. Some studies I've seen, like there's such a generational divide between like who is causing this kind of third wave and things like that, and it is seen as like these kind of raves and like weddings and things, and there are exceptions and there are people hosting these events which are obviously huge kind of COVID circulators, but ultimately, as you've both kind of alluded to there, it's keeping open offices where people could be working from home. It's kind of not having such strict enforcement on public transport, but that's the only way that people can go and buy their groceries or can go and get to their vaccination appointments. Because they don't necessarily have that disposable income to take a taxi or to drive somewhere. So I agree. I think they are quite distasteful. And to be honest, I think as shocking as they are, I think people have just kind of they've been met with quite a lot of anger. Like it's holding people personally responsible for things that like anyone is really quite keen to avoid, apart from that really small exception.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. It like genuinely such a small percentage of people. And yeah, I think what you're saying as well there with like office spaces and stuff, again, also is crucial. As you spoke about last week, Rachel, about the lack of financial support with regards to furlough and job safety and things like that this time around, as opposed to the first time, even though that this, wave of the pandemic was even worse than the first wave, right? Like, this whole, it's like, it's it's good messaging because it's kind of all encompassing in a sense, with regards to like avoiding government responsibility. But yeah, just like, yeah, very distasteful. And just with like more generally as well, I feel like we see this when you get like media representation of kind of lower income families and stuff. The like the fraction of the tiny fraction of people breaking COVID, just like the tiny fraction of people who are like really manipulating benefits, for example, is not representative at all of the whole, right?
Yeah.
And so just again, like, it's interesting how like different, like how media sources and different advertisement stuff can really manipulate a narrative, right? And kind of get a certain perception in people's heads. And so yeah, that's I guess my final comments on the poster situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Should we move on to?
Oh, or do you have anything else to
No,
add,
no, I
Rachel?
think I
Sorry.
was just saying the same in terms of like summary of a bit more UK news before we kind of go internationally.
Yeah, exactly.